All right, YouTube. So one of the followers out here, and thank you for engaging with me, that the Volkswagen GTI that was towed in for an oil leak, I told you it smelled suspicious, and it was. Like I said, we don't normally see cars coming in for oil leaks unless it's someone effed up, and someone did. So here's the story. I get a message about a car getting towed in. Can you look at it, make sure there's oil in it before you start it, blah, 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 blah. Nor did they tell me that they took the vehicle to Valveoline Quick Lube for an oil change. Nor did they tell me the whole story. Just, hey, I got this Volkswagen, it's leaking oil. That's typically, I never get the whole story. And I would rather get the whole story out of me making the right decisions for things and out of respect. But I don't always get the story. And maybe this customer is able to communicate the story, but for some reason or another, he didn't. So Caleb and I, check the oil. The oil's full. There's a puddle under the car. All right, so I'm like, all right, we're going to deal with this mess later. And we were busy all day long. And then at the end of the day, we brought in, the less important things on the scale of what I need to do in a day, which was that car. And then an oil and safety inspection. So I bring the car in, I shut it off. There's a puddle of oil on the ground. I put it up in the air. The whole under car of the Volkswagen is soaked in oil. And I'm like, that's coming from the top. Set it back down, ask Caleb to start the car, fire up the camera. We're doing a video about, the sticker and what's going on. Clear video that the oil filter is squirting oil out of the seal or whatever. I didn't take it apart. I just was diagnosing what the problem was. Call the customer, tell them, we want to start with replacing the oil filter and put the oil in it and go from there. They get that all resolved. And then their salesman comes to pick up the car and actually tells me the story that they took it to Valveoline for a quick oil change at $120 for a quick oil change. Could have been catastrophic, just so you know. Quick oil change, non-experienced people or experienced people, but I would say less of experienced people. And they bring the car back and say, hey dude, we didn't have an oil leak before we brought you the car. Now it's pissing oil out of it. What did you do to my car? And that's kind of the story probably all the time. I refuse customers' cars if they have an oil leak. Either you're going to commit to fixing it or you're going to go out. So if it's seepage, I'm okay with it. If it's dripping, we're done. We're not doing business. You either correct the problem or go someplace else. So for one, they should have documented it and said, hey, this car has an oil leak or oil seepage. Take a picture of it dripping on the ground, blah, 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 blah. But none of that was the case with the vehicle at the time of the oil change. So the lubers bring the car back in, put it up in the air, and do a video from under the car, from the oil pan side, saying that it's coming from the oil pan area, right? Well, it's kind of weird. It wasn't pissing out, and then now it is pissing out. So then they Jedi mind trick the customer and say, well, it's nothing we did. And then the salesman actually showed me the video from Valveoline. I'm like, well, that's just straight fucking lying to you. Straight lying to you that the problem wasn't theirs, because the problem was at the oil filter where they changed the oil filter. So my video clearly shows a stream of piss coming out of the oil filter while the car is running, hence Valveoline caused the problem. But what did they do? Instantly deny it. Instantly deny it. Like, I'll give you a scenario. We had a customer with a car that was in our shop multiple times, and then I think the last time it was in was for an oil change or something else. I don't even remember. And then the customer's back to get the intake manifold work done, says he had work done someplace else. The car still runs bad, and so then I re-look at the car. There's no reason for me to put the car up in the air because he's not there for an oil change or any front end work that we advised or tires that we advised. So I pull the codes before I get into working on this car, and then I document what's going on. The battery cranks slow, the starter sounds funny, all the warning lights that are on for codes. Tell Rachel what's going on with the car. Customer declines fixing the intake manifold today and whatever else is wrong with the car, and then says, hey, did you check the oil leak? And then Rachel's like, you didn't say you're here for an oil leak, so why would we look for an oil leak? He's like, well, I was online and it said that the car could have an oil leak from the intake manifold. Well, the Chrysler 335 or 32 or whatever it is, there's no oil going through the intake manifold. And if there is, there's a serious problem. So Rachel asked me, do you know anything about an oil leak on this car? I was like, no, that's not what the work order says. You signed them in. What did the customer say? Wants the intake manifold replaced. So at this point, like, I already looked at the car for what they were here for. I already spent time on it, pulled the codes out of the car, documented conditions, mileage, VIN, confirm all that stuff. Like, we're doing work. That's work. Putting in work. And Rachel, the customer says, well, I don't want to fix the intake manifold today now because of the price. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me why I have an oil leak? And then he turns the story into, well, ever since you worked on my car, I've had an oil leak. And so when I'm standing there listening to the conversation, I'm like, well, we weren't the last person to work on your car. Yeah, you told us you took it someplace else and had all the coils replaced, and your car still runs bad. So we weren't the last place to touch your car after we told you what it needed. So then I tell Rachel, I said, look in the history. When was the oil change done? And she's like 3 months ago. I'm like, all right, let me just go out in the shop and bring the car back in, right? And this is the important part of this. We took the stance like, you're declining the work that you're here for, but then you want me to investigate another problem that we don't know who caused it, me, your other mechanic, or whatever the case may be. So I told Rachel, I said, all right, it's time for us to get paid. And then while she's still on the phone with him, I said, nah, let me just bring it in and make sure that it isn't something else or something that was done here. Just to make sure that I'm not buying a motor for this guy or a problem, or maybe that's another needed repair that I have to bring to his attention. Because he gave it to me after the fact that I looked at his car, backed it out. He doesn't want any work done for his original request, not saying he's here for an oil leak also. So I put it back up in the air, and then I'm like, oh, I remember this. This is why I hate oil changes, right? The original drain plug was stripped in the pan, and I used one of those universal oil drain plugs, and I have great success with them. And it was just dripping a little bit, but enough to make the customer think he had an oil leak. So Rachel comes out and she goes, do you have an oil leak? I said, yeah, it's coming from the universal drain plug. And I said, the last shop that worked on this car before us are the ones who stripped the threads out, and then I'm the one stuck with the bullshit afterwards. I said, now if I tell the guy he needs an $800 oil pan, what do you think he's going to say? He's going to try and blame us, which it wasn't our fault. We weren't the last place to change his oil before he had a stripped out oil pan. So I said, no, let me tighten it up a little bit more, and monitored it and it stopped leaking. So Rachel says, what do I tell the customer? I said, you own up to what happened, and you tell him that the drain plug, for some reason or another, just didn't seal. We turned it a little bit more, and the drip is gone. Mm-hmm. That's how you handle it. Regardless of what happened in that situation, you have to own up to certain things. And a lot of quick lubes lie and decline and say it's not their fault. And then to go as far as make a video on the Volkswagen from underneath the car and saying the oil that's pissing out of it all over the place isn't created by them was such a lie, because I showed you guys the real footage, the real honest guy, the real footage. And now I sent that to the owner of the vehicle, and I sent that to the salesman. I said, you take this video back to them and you ask them why they're effing liars and refuse to stand behind their work. Yeah, so that's crappy. I mean, you have to own up to things in our business, and I'm sure a lot of places don't, and a lot of customers, point the finger at people, and we call that CYA, cover your ass. That's why I document every condition that I possibly can. And do I miss things? I miss chips and things and wheel damage. I try to do as much as I can, because you never who's trying to get over on you in the environment that we are in. And that's the truth. But this is the true story. Valveoline screwed up. Valveoline got the vehicle back in, up on their bay, videotaped underneath the car, tried to lie and Jedi mind trick the customer. Now, not everybody is a super duper mechanic, but I would have never left that place with a trail of oil coming out of my vehicle and coming back. Yeah, I would have said, well, find someone in your shop that's smarter than you to find the oil leak that I didn't have. You follow me?
Yes.
Find someone in the shop that's smarter than you, who's doing this video that was a complete lie. Because not all videos are true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Island Boys kissing was a true video.
I didn't.
So you got it raw from me. And if I'm hurting feelings out there, I don't care. It's the way it is. Thanks for watching.